Before Bethlehem, there was glory. Before the cross, there was purpose. But who is Jesus before it all? Imagine the vast, silent void before creation, darkness without form, waiting for a voice. Picture glory so ancient and radiant it never fades, even when shadow covers the earth. Now, see a figure stepping down from eternity into time itself, then rising again, transformed and victorious. This is not just history. This is the journey of Jesus, crossing from the eternal into the temporal and back again, crowned in glory. Tonight, you won't just hear the story of Jesus, you'll see your own story reflected in his. You'll discover that before any manger, before any crown, there was a divine purpose pulling everything into motion. This journey is bigger than a birth or a death. It is the invitation to understand who you truly are. Jesus didn't start in a humble stable. He began as the eternal Word, alive with God, shaping everything that exists. John 1:1. This truth turns the ordinary story of Christmas on its head. It is not just a birth story, but a cosmic revelation. The land where it all unfolded, the Holy Land, is no mere backdrop. It's a stage set by God, where every stone, river, and mountain holds divine significance. Then there's the Roman Empire, powerful, brutal, and vast. It was the world's mightiest empire at the time, ruling with iron fists and gods of stone. Into that harsh, political reality stepped a king whose kingdom was unlike any other, quiet, eternal, and far beyond the reach of Caesar's crown. His story challenges every notion of power and authority. Just as that land was chosen with a purpose, so too is your life woven into this greater design. Your struggles, your questions, your hopes, they are not random. They are threads in the same grand tapestry. And understanding who Jesus truly is before Bethlehem invites you to see your life differently, not as an accident, but as part of a divine plan unfolding. Before there was light, matter, or even time as we know it, something older than the angels themselves existed, an eternal dance between the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. It wasn't divine loneliness seeking company, but a communion so deep it overflowed into creation. Jesus was there not as a supporting actor, but as the Word, the very living Word that would shape everything with purpose. And when he prays in John 17, saying, "Glorify me in your presence with the glory I had with you before the world began," it's as if he pulls back the curtains of eternity for a brief moment. The feeling that the universe has a heart, and that heart has a name. It's curious how so many live as if they were products of chance, a cosmic statistic that simply happened. But when you understand that you were dreamed of before time, by the one who was in the dance of the Trinity, everything changes. No crooked line, no big mistake, no long absence can erase this truth. You were dreamed of by the Word. He didn't create you out of chaos, but thought of you in love. It is as if every part of your soul carries a fragment of that celestial conversation from Genesis 1. Imagine someone planting a garden not just for beauty, but because they love who will live there. That's what the Word did. And even though the world has become messy since then, there is a thread almost invisible but strong that pulls you back to that original purpose. And this thread begins to reveal itself more clearly when we realize that Jesus didn't just appear in history in the New Testament. In fact, he was writing the lines between the lines from the very beginning. In the beginning, when there was only darkness and the breath of God hovered over the waters, the Word was already there, vibrant, alive, and intentional. John tells us that all things were made through him, and without him, nothing came into being. That him was Jesus, not a distant idea, but a creator with hands deep in the dust, shaping Adam's frame, whispering breath into clay and throughout Genesis. That same voice echoes not from a distance, but from within the very fabric of every story. He wasn't just watching history unfold. He was weaving it together. Take Abraham, sitting in the heat of the day, and three mysterious visitors appear. One speaks as the Lord. This isn't poetic language or metaphor, it is what theologians call a theophany, the visible manifestation of the invisible God. Many believe that one of those figures was the pre-incarnate Christ, walking with his creation, not above it. And then there's the wilderness, years later when Moses strikes the rock, and water flows. Paul would later say, that rock was Christ. Can you see the thread? Jesus isn't introduced in Matthew. He's revealed through shadows in Genesis, in deserts, in flames, in whispers. It's like a divine needle pulling through the pages of Scripture, invisible to the naked eye unless you're paying close attention. Jesus is the scarlet thread running through the linen of the Old Testament, the burning bush that spoke with authority, the commander of the Lord's army who appeared to Joshua. All glimpses dim, but real of the one who would later walk on water and wash feet. The Bible is not a fragmented book with disconnected stories. It's a symphony with one recurring melody, the presence of Christ, from Eden to Egypt, from the altar to the cross. And when you realize that, something in your own story starts to shift, because if Jesus was present from the beginning, active in chaos, close in confusion, then maybe he's been present in your beginnings too, in the family that shaped you, in the mistakes that marked you, even in the deserts where you felt forgotten. He is not just a figure who entered history. He is the author who wrote your name in the margins. And his appearances in ancient deserts prepare us for a moment that would change everything, when the invisible would finally become visible. The King of Kings arrived not with thunder or parade, but through the narrow birth canal of a young, unnoticed girl. No velvet cradle, no gold-stitched robes, just a feeding trough, hay-stained and rough. Angels filled the sky, but their song was sung to shepherds outcasts, night workers, men society barely counted. Bethlehem, a forgotten dot on the map, became the epicenter of eternity, and Egypt, a place once known for slavery, became the shelter for salvation's infant. This is the upside-down blueprint of heaven, glory. Wrapped in obscurity, he could have chosen a palace, a royal court, but he chose the arms of Mary and the silence of Joseph. Think about that. The one who spoke galaxies into being chose to be speechless, needing to be taught how to walk. From Bethlehem to Egypt, then to Nazareth, a town of such little reputation that people would say, can anything good come from there? And yet, the Messiah would grow up under that stigma, not because he had to, but because he wanted to meet you in your own place of being overlooked, misunderstood, dismissed. That's why his birth matters so much more than a Christmas nativity scene. It's a cosmic statement. No one is too low for God to come near. The king was born among animals, so that not a single soul, no matter how wounded or hidden, could say, he wouldn't understand someone like me. He understands anonymity. He knows rejection, escape, uncertainty. If you've ever felt like life started you on the wrong side of the tracks, remember, so did his, not as punishment, but as a path to meet you where you are. And maybe that's why his glory was veiled at first, not absent, just wrapped in the ordinary. Because there's something powerful about the sacred hiding in plain sight. It's not always in the loud moments that divinity breaks in, but in the long silences, the unspoken prayers, the years of waiting. And as the child grew in wisdom and favor, quiet and unseen by the world, so too would the plan unfold, one dusty road at a time, one encounter at a time, moving closer and closer to a collision between heaven and the everyday. He didn't choose a throne, he chose a trail. The ministry of Jesus unfolded not in temples of marble, but in dusty villages, sunburnt roads, and nameless crossroads. The Jordan River, where he was baptized, wasn't glamorous, it was wild and raw. Yet it became the site where the heavens tore open and a voice thundered, "This is my son." Then came the desert, dry, brutal, silent. 40 days with hunger as his companion and temptation whispering in the heat. But even there, each grain of sand bore witness he came not just to speak of redemption, but to walk it. His feet carried redemption into real places, Cana, where water turned to wine, and joy was restored to a wedding that almost ended in shame. Capharnaum, a fishing village where he called the ordinary fishermen, tax collectors to join an eternal mission. Samaria, a land avoided by Jews, where he sat by a well and spoke life to a woman whose soul was dry, and then Decapolis and cities, filled with Gentiles, idols, and forgotten people. He walked into their territory. Unafraid, he healed there, taught there, loved there. Each mile was a declaration. No place is too far for grace. His path wasn't just geographic, it was deeply symbolic. Every location became a layer of God's heart exposed in Galilee. He touched lepers in Nain. He stopped a funeral procession just to give a mother her son back. In every place, a piece of heaven broke through the crust of earth. And what made it more beautiful wasn't just the miracles, but the fact that he didn't avoid the broken neighborhoods. He sought them out. He entered their pain. He sat with the forgotten. He didn't just preach redemption, he mapped it, step by step. And if you look closely, you'll see that he still does. The roads he walked along buried, but the pattern remains. He still finds people by wells in the heat of their shame. He still steps into cities others avoid. He still notices the widow mourning alone. Maybe that's why his ministry wasn't confined to synagogues, it moved with people, alongside their steps, into their mess. Because the next place he was going, it would be the hardest road yet, the one where blood would fall instead of water. It began in an upper room, not in a stadium, not with a microphone, but with bread breaking in candlelight. The king knelt to wash the feet of men who would soon run away. The Last Supper wasn't just a farewell, it was a final act of intimacy. Jesus looked into the eyes of Judas and still offered him a seat at the table. Love, here, wasn't a concept. It was gritty, uncomfortable, and real. From that quiet night, he stepped into a garden, where olive trees bore witness to a soul crushed with sorrow. The same hands that healed the blind now gripped the earth, sweating blood. Gethsemane was agony wrapped in silence. The friends he had poured into slept as he wept, and yet he still rose to meet his betrayer with a kiss. No resistance. No fight, just surrender from there. The trial was a blur of spit, false accusations, torn clothes, but it was the cross that stood as the true courtroom. And on it, 7 final statements hung like banners over all of human history. Father, forgive them. Not just words, but a rupture in the cycle of revenge. It is finished. Not defeat, but the exhale of victory. Each phrase, a revelation of the heart of the divine. And then the veil tore. That thick curtain in the temple barrier between humanity and holiness split from top to bottom, as if God himself reached down and said, "No more distance." That tear echoed louder than any earthquake. It was the physical sign of a spiritual reality. The way was now open. No more intermediaries. No more fear. The same God who once thundered from Mount Sinai now whispered from a torn sky, "Come closer." The cross didn't just change your afterlife, it shattered the walls of your present one. But before resurrection's light came the silence of a sealed tomb. The world went still. The disciples scattered. Hope seemed buried with him, and yet, hidden beneath that silence, something ancient was stirring. The very power that breathed stars into existence was beginning to move again. Because this story wasn't ending in death, it was simply holding its breath, waiting for the stone to roll. The stone rolled not to let Jesus out, but to let us see in. Early that morning, before the city stirred, the tomb stood open like a cosmic announcement. Death had lost its grip. But it wasn't with fireworks or spectacle that he appeared. It was with a name. Mary. He said, and that one word shattered the veil of grief. She turned, stunned, because the voice she had heard in sermons was now calling her personally. That's the heart of resurrection. Not just power over death, but intimacy with the living. It wasn't just that he rose, it's that he returned to find us. Later, on the road to Emmaus, two disciples walked. Shoulders slumped, hope reigned. Jesus joined them not as a glowing figure, but as a stranger. He walked beside them, asked questions, let them speak their disappointment. And only when he broke bread did their eyes open. That's often how it works, isn't it? We don't recognize him in the moment, but later in the breaking, in the quiet routine, we suddenly realize he was with me all along. The miracle isn't always loud. Sometimes it's wrapped in the rhythm of your daily walk. These appearances weren't just for proof, they were for presence. He showed up in locked rooms, not to scold, but to say, peace. He let Thomas touch his wounds. Because questions aren't threats to God, they're doors to deeper encounters, and he cooked breakfast by the sea for the same disciples who had abandoned him. No lecture, just firewood, fish, and forgiveness. The resurrected Jesus didn't float above life, he stepped right back into it. Not to remind them of their failures, but to remind them that the story wasn't over.
And maybe that's the part we miss. We look for him in the dramatic, the thunderous, the perfect. But the risen Jesus is often waiting in your routine, in the ordinary walk to work, in the silent drive home, in the quiet moment before bed. Resurrection is just about one day, it's about a person who still walks beside us, even when we don't recognize him. And if he stayed close after rising, what makes us think he won't meet us on our next long road ... Or even before we speak the next word. When Jesus ascended, he didn't float into the clouds to escape us, he rose to represent us. Picture it, the resurrected Son, carrying the marks of the cross, stepping into the heavenly realm not as a guest, but as a rightful high priest. The Lamb who was slain now enters the sanctuary not made by human hands. Hebrews tells us he didn't pass through symbols, he passed through the heavens. And he did it carrying your story, your pain, your tears. His ascension wasn't departure, it was installation. A throne was waiting, not just for rulership, but for advocacy. The beauty of Jesus' eternal priesthood is this: he doesn't just understand you, he represents you. In ancient times, the high priest would enter the Holy of Holies once a year with the names of the tribes written on a breastplate. Jesus entered heaven with something deeper: your wounds, your doubts, your name engraved in his love. He intercedes not as someone detached from struggle, but as someone who cried, bled, was betrayed, felt abandoned. He knows what heartbreak tastes like. That's why your prayers never fall into a void, they fall into hands that still bear scars. And when you feel too broken to speak, he speaks for you. When you don't have the words, he becomes the word again. You're not forgotten, ignored, or misunderstood in the heavens. You are carried. Think about that. In a world that often reduces us to data, performance, or image, Jesus sees your essence. He advocates, not because he has to, but because he wants to. The throne of grace is not a court of judgment, it's a seat of mercy. And through him, you are invited boldly in. But here's the paradox. The same Jesus who intercedes for us now is also the one preparing to return not as priest only, but as king. The ascension was not the end of the movement, it was the pause before the procession. Because beyond the clouds, beyond the veil, something is stirring. The lion is ready to roar. This is not just the story of Jesus, it's the story of humanity and of your soul. The eternal Word stepped down to the cross so that you could walk with Him into eternity. From the moment of creation to the promise of a new creation, Jesus has been there working, loving, redeeming. He was in the beginning, He is here now, and He is the future waiting to unfold. The cross isn't just an event. It's the bridge between heaven and earth, between brokenness and wholeness. The veil was torn, the tomb opened, and grace poured out like living water. When you realize this, your own journey takes on a new light. Your struggles aren't detours, they re-part of the path He has already walked with you. The King of Glory is not distant, He is closer than your next breath. So, what's stopping you from walking with Him today? If the one who created the stars longs to walk beside you, why hesitate? This story invites you not only to listen, but to respond. To step out of the shadows of doubt into the light of a grace that never fades. Your story is waiting for that moment where everything changes. If Jesus is all this, what's still holding you back from walking with Him? Write in the comments, I want to walk with Jesus. Let's pray together now if you're ready. Speak from your heart and invite Him in. And if this journey stirred something inside you, don't stop here. Curious about the silent years of Jesus, the 30 years before His public ministry? Watch the next video, The Hidden Years of the Messiah, what Jesus did before His ministry. Like, share, and subscribe so we can carry this message to every corner of the earth. Because this isn't just a story to watch, it's a life to live.